The humid air of the Amazon hung heavy with tension. Birds had stopped singing, and the rustle of the leaves carried an unnatural silence. Deep in the emerald wilderness, something colossal moved, its footsteps trembling through the roots like thunder. King Kong, scarred from his battles with monsters of another world, had wandered into this forgotten jungle, seeking peace, but destiny had other plans. His eyes burned with a primal calmness, yet his heart sensed the presence of another predator, one that ruled this place long before man ever set foot here. Hidden beneath the thick canopy and murky swamps, Anaconda lay in wait. A serpent longer than a train car, her scales shimmered with hues of green and gold, blending perfectly with the jungle floor. For centuries, she had reigned as the undisputed queen of these lands, worshipped by tribes as a god and feared by all creatures that crossed her path. But now, her dominion was challenged by a beast from beyond the jungle, a creature that shook the earth itself. When their worlds collided, nature itself seemed to hold its breath. Kong's roar split the sky, scattering flocks of birds into chaos. The anaconda's hiss rose in response, low and serpentine, echoing like thunder through the vines. The jungle became their arena, and every living creature knew that survival today would come at a cost. Waterfalls roared like drums of war, and the sun bled through the canopy like fire, casting their shadows in a dance of death. Kong stepped into the riverbed, his massive hand crushing boulders like pebbles. The water surged around him as he sniffed the air, catching the faint, musky scent of his rival. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, a mix of fury, curiosity, and pain. He didn't seek this fight, but he couldn't walk away either. Somewhere deep inside him, a memory stirred of battles past, monsters, pain, loss, and the never-ending struggle for dominance. Anaconda slithered silently through the underbrush, her movements graceful yet terrifying. Her cold eyes reflected Kong's massive frame as she watched him from the shadows. She had no concept of fear, only instinct and hunger. This wasn't just about territory, it was about survival. She felt the jungle's pulse in her scales, every vibration, every breath. Her time as queen was being tested, and she would not surrender it easily. The first strike came without warning. The serpent lunged from the water, her jaws snapping like thunder, fangs glistening with venom. Kong barely had time to react. He swung his arm, catching the serpent midair and hurling her across the swamp. Trees splintered, and water exploded like a storm. The jungle screamed as titans clashed, the ground shaking beneath their fury. Birds fled, monkeys screeched, and the world seemed to end in a roar of chaos. Kong charged forward, roaring with primal rage. His fists crashed into the earth, sending shockwaves across the jungle. Anaconda, lightning fast, coiled around his leg, tightening her hold until the mighty Kong fell to one knee. Her strength was unreal, like the jungle itself had come alive to crush him. But Kong's will was forged in battles against gods and monsters. He tore her coils, muscles bulging, veins flaring, every motion a war cry. The jungle became a storm of violence and sound. Water splashed high, vines snapped, and the cries of dying trees echoed through the valley. Kong roared again, slamming his fist into the serpent's skull, but she only tightened her grip, hissing in defiance. Their breaths mixed in the mist, one hot and heavy, one cold and deadly. Lightning cracked above the canopy, as if the heavens themselves were watching. Then came a moment of eerie stillness. Kong's massive hand gripped the serpent's neck, the anaconda's coils locked around his chest. They stared into each other's eyes, two ancient souls that mirrored the untamed chaos of nature. Time slowed, and the jungle fell silent once again. Somewhere in that gaze was understanding. This was not just a fight for life, but for legacy. Kong roared and ripped himself free with a surge of power that split the air like thunder. The anaconda flew backward, slamming into an ancient tree that shattered under her weight. She hissed in rage, the sound vibrating through the air like a war horn. Kong pounded his chest, the rhythm echoing across the valley, a challenge no beast could ignore. For a brief moment, even the sky seemed darker, as clouds swirled over the jungle, drawn to the power of their conflict. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then turning into a torrential downpour. Water cascaded over Kong's fur and glistened along the serpent scales. The jungle floor turned to mud, each step a thunderous struggle. Anaconda moved like liquid shadow, circling him, testing, waiting for weakness. Kong's breath came in deep growls, each exhale steaming in the cold rain. Every scar on his body ached, every muscle screamed, but the fire inside him refused to die. The serpent struck again, faster than lightning. She coiled around his arm, fangs slashing toward his throat. Kong caught her jaws mid-strike, his fingers digging into her scales. Their power collided, neither willing to yield. The ground beneath them cracked, trees bent from the shockwaves. Kong slammed her into the river once, twice, the water exploding around them. Still, she wouldn't let go. Her body tightened, crushing his ribcage like iron chains. Pain tore through Kong's chest, but he refused to fall. With a primal scream that echoed through the heavens, he grabbed a broken tree trunk and drove it down onto her body. The serpent shrieked, a terrible sound that silenced even the rain. She released him for a moment, sliding away through the water like a ghost. Kong dropped to one knee, gasping for breath, his chest heaving. He looked around, eyes blazing with fury and exhaustion. The jungle smelled of blood, earth, and thunder. Anaconda vanished into the mist, her body rippling through the water like a dark wave. Kong stood tall again, every breath a growl. He knew she wasn't gone. She was waiting, lurking, watching. Every instinct screamed that this was far from over. The jungle had become their battleground, and the rain felt like drums of fate beating against his back. He clenched his fists and roared into the storm, daring her to strike again. From beneath the water's surface, her golden eyes flashed like fire. She surged upward, wrapping around his torso with terrifying speed. Her coils constricted tighter and tighter, ribs cracking, bones grinding. Kong howled in rage and agony, his massive hands clawing at her scales. But this time, the serpent's grip was merciless. She wanted to end it, to crush the legend, to prove that no king could rule her jungle. Lightning exploded across the sky as Kong smashed backward into a cliff, shattering the rock. Pain radiated through his body, yet deep within that pain burned something greater, defiance. He would not die here. Not in this jungle. Not to her. His eyes flared with fury as he drove his fists into her coils, again and again, the sound like boulders colliding. Blood stained the rainwater. The serpent hissed, her body quivering under his blows. With a roar that split the storm, Kong grasped her neck and lifted with every ounce of power left in him. Muscles tore, veins bulged, and his roar grew louder until the entire valley shook. The anaconda writhed and screamed, thrashing violently. He slammed her into the ground, the impact creating a crater that sent mud and water flying for yards. The serpent lay stunned, her massive body twitching, but she wasn't done yet. With one last desperate strike, she lunged, her fangs sinking deep into Kong's shoulder. He roared, the pain unbearable, but instead of retreating, he grabbed her head and twisted with raw, brutal force. The sound that followed echoed through eternity, a crack that silenced the storm itself. The serpent's body fell limp, her coils unraveling slowly into the mud. Kong stumbled backward, breathing heavily, rain dripping down his face like tears. The jungle grew quiet again. Only the sound of falling rain remained. Kong looked at the fallen serpent, the mighty queen of the jungle, and felt no victory, only sorrow. This was not a battle he had wanted, only one he couldn't avoid. The jungle had demanded a ruler, and nature had chosen him. He bowed his head briefly, honoring his fallen rival, before turning away into the mist. The thunder faded, the storm broke, and dawn began to rise over a jungle forever changed. As the golden light of dawn seeped through the shattered canopy, steam rose from the blood-soaked earth. The battle was over, but the jungle still trembled with its memory. Trees leaned broken and twisted, rivers ran red, and the cries of distant creatures carried the echo of what had happened. King Kong stood alone at the heart of it all, his breath heavy, his body scarred and trembling. His fur was matted with mud and rain, his shoulder torn open where the serpent's fangs had pierced him. But in his eyes burned a quiet, haunting strength, not triumph, but endurance. He looked down at the fallen serpent. Even in death, she was magnificent. Her scales shimmered faintly in the new sunlight, a final glimmer of her ancient power. Kong stepped closer and lowered his head, almost as if to speak. He didn't roar or beat his chest this time. Instead, he simply stood in silence. There was respect in that stillness, the kind only one king could offer to another. The jungle had witnessed countless battles, but none like this. None that carried the weight of two legends meeting their fate. Rainwater pooled around them, washing away the blood, the mud, the remnants of fury. A breeze swept through the valley, carrying with it the soft scent of flowers and wet soil, the jungle's way of beginning anew. Kong turned toward the rising sun, its warmth touching his wounded body. He could feel the pulse of the earth beneath his feet again, no longer trembling in fear but beating in rhythm with his heart. He was not an invader anymore. He was part of it now. Days passed, and the jungle slowly began to heal. The animals that had fled returned cautiously, birds nesting again in shattered trees, monkeys leaping through branches where silence had ruled. Nature always remembered, but it also forgave. Kong became a shadow among the vines, no longer seeking to rule or destroy. He wandered quietly, protecting the land that had tested him. Sometimes, he would stop by the great river where he had fought and sit for hours, his reflection merging with the flowing water, lost in thought. At night, when the moon rose silver and full, he could almost hear her, the faint hiss of the serpent through the wind, the whisper of scales sliding through the grass. It wasn't haunting, it was something deeper, a bond formed through struggle and survival. In her death, she had given him something he had long lost, purpose. For the first time since his battles with monsters of the world beyond, he felt connected to something greater than himself. The jungle wasn't his kingdom. It was his home. The scars healed slowly, but they never disappeared. Each mark told a story of pain, defiance, and transformation. The creatures of the jungle began to treat him differently. They no longer ran when he approached. The birds sang again when he passed. The jaguars and crocodiles watched him from afar, not as prey or rival, but as guardian. Wordless respect grew in the heartbeat of the forest, as though the jungle itself had accepted him as its silent protector. Storms came and went, but nothing could shake the balance that had been restored. The vines regrew over shattered stones, flowers bloomed in the footprints of giants, and life found its way again. Kong moved with a gentleness unknown to his kind, plucking fallen trees to clear paths for rivers, shielding nests from floods, roaring only when danger threatened the peace. The legend of the battle spread among the tribes. They spoke of a spirit king who had defeated the serpent goddess not for power, but for balance. One night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Kong stood atop a mountain cliff overlooking the endless jungle. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and for a moment, he saw her shape in the clouds, massive, coiled, eternal. He lifted his gaze and let out a deep, mournful roar that echoed through the heavens. It wasn't a cry of victory or sorrow, it was remembrance. The jungle answered in whispers of wind and rain, a song only the wild could understand. Time passed, but legends don't fade easily. Generations later, tribes still spoke of the day the sky split open, when thunder took form, and titans walked among them. They carved their story into stone, painted it on cavern walls, the ape king and the serpent queen, locked in a dance of chaos and creation. They said their battle birthed the balance that kept the jungle alive. And when storms rolled through, people would look to the mountains and swear they could hear his roar in the rain. Far beyond the horizon, where the rivers twist into infinity and the jungle breathes in eternal rhythm, a shadow still moves when the moon is full. Some say it's the ghost of the serpent, others say it's the last guardian watching over the wild. But those who've seen it up close know the truth, it's him. King Kong, scarred but eternal, protector of the land he once fought to conquer. The jungle is quiet now, but in its silence, his legend roars forever. Storms came and went, but nothing could shake the balance that had been restored. The vines regrew over shattered stones, flowers bloomed in the footprints of giants, and life found its way again. Kong moved with a gentleness unknown to his kind, plucking fallen trees to clear paths for rivers, shielding nests from floods, roaring only when danger threatened the peace. The legend of the battle spread among the tribes. They spoke of a spirit king who had defeated the serpent goddess not for power, but for balance. One night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Kong stood atop a mountain cliff overlooking the endless jungle. Lightning flashed across the horizon, and for a moment, he saw her shape in the clouds, massive, coiled, eternal. He lifted his gaze and let out a deep, mournful roar that echoed through the heavens. It wasn't a cry of victory or sorrow, it was remembrance. The jungle answered in whispers of wind and rain, a song only the wild could understand. Time passed, but legends don't fade easily. Generations later, tribes still spoke of the day the sky split open, when thunder took form, and titans walked among them. They carved their story into stone, painted it on cavern walls, the ape king and the serpent queen, locked in a dance of chaos and creation. They said their battle birthed the balance that kept the jungle alive. And when storms rolled through, people would look to the mountains and swear they could hear his roar in the rain.